The chemotherapy drip counted down its final minutes as I watched my sister's livestream on my tablet. The oncology ward's sterile white walls seemed to fade away as I focused on her voice, cheerfully describing my outdated equipment to potential buyers. And here we have some kind of centrifuge thing. Starting bid $50. Sarah's perfectly manicured hand held up a piece of equipment worth more than her luxury SUV. Everything must go mine elf. Our brother Michael won't be returning to his research anyway. I glanced at my research assistant Daniel, who sat in the corner of my hospital room, his laptop open and recording everything. His jaw was clenched tight, but he maintained his silence as instructed. "Sir," he whispered, "they just sold the prototype for $200 to a college student who wants to use it for parts." I nodded slowly, the ghost of a smile playing across my lips. "Perfect. Make sure you get a clear shot of the serial number." The prototype they just sold for spare parts was worth millions. Not for what it was, but for what it could do. 10 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and 3 complete redesigns had gone into creating that outdated machine. But my family had never understood what I did. They never tried. It started 15 years ago, when I turned down my father's offer to join the family's pharmaceutical company, Barrett Pharmaceuticals. Instead of taking my rightful place in the corporate hierarchy, I chose to pursue my own research. "You're throwing away everything I built for you," Father had thundered during our last real conversation. "For what? Some pipe dream about revolutionary medical technology." I remember standing in his office, surrounded by the trappings of conventional success, the awards, the stock certificates, the photos with politicians. Everything that meant nothing to me. "I'm not throwing anything away," I had replied calmly. "I'm building something new, something that could change everything." "Change everything," he scoffed. "The medical industry doesn't need changing. It needs reliable profits and proven methods." My sister Sarah, already a rising star in the company's marketing department, had chimed in from her perch on Father's desk. "Michael, be reasonable. The company's research division is state-of-the-art. Why start from scratch when you could lead our team?" Because their research division was focused on developing slightly different versions of existing drugs, just enough changes to extend patents and maintain profit margins. Because their idea of innovation was finding new ways to market the same old solutions. Because I had seen my mother die of the same cancer that now flowed through my veins, and I knew there had to be a better way. So I walked away, took my trust fund, the one they couldn't touch, and built my own lab. For 15 years they mocked my little experiments and waste of potential. They never bothered to understand what I was actually creating. The irony of developing cancer while working on revolutionary cancer treatment technology wasn't lost on me, but it had actually proved advantageous. My family's dismissive attitude toward my work meant they never looked too closely at my hobby lab during my treatment. They never noticed that the worthless equipment they were now selling contained prototype components for a treatment that would revolutionize oncology. They didn't understand that the outdated machines were actually cutting-edge technology disguised to look unremarkable. Most importantly, they hadn't bothered to read the patent applications I had filed this morning, just before my final chemotherapy session. "Sir," Daniel's voice pulled me back to the present. "They just found the backup server." I watched as Sarah held up what looked like an old desktop computer. "Ancient hardware, probably full of failed experiments. $50 and it's yours." If they had bothered to check, they would have found that the ancient hardware contained redundant copies of all my research data, encrypted and automatically backing up to secure cloud storage every time they powered it up to show potential buyers. "Got it all, Daniel?" He nodded, still recording. "Every serial number, every component. The patent office has the complete documentation, and the timestamps on their live stream sales match our registry perfectly." I leaned back against the hospital pillows, letting the satisfaction wash over me. "How long until they realize?" "The patent applications go public tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your family's pharmaceutical stock opens trading at 9:30. Perfect timing. The thing about cancer treatment is that it gives you a lot of time to think." During countless hours of chemotherapy, I had refined my plans, checked every detail, prepared for every contingency. When my family had first learned of my diagnosis, their reaction had been predictably self-serving. Father saw it as an opportunity to finally bring me back into the fold, offering me experimental treatments through the company's research division. Sarah had immediately started planning how to help by taking over my affairs. What they didn't know was that I had already treated myself using my own technology. The cancer currently showing up in my medical records was carefully manufactured data, designed to create the perfect cover story. Every emergency that kept me from protecting my lab was meticulously planned. The chemotherapy I was receiving was actually a saline solution, arranged through Dr. Matthews, my old college roommate and now chief of oncology, who had verified my technology's effectiveness and helped document everything. Sir, Daniel interrupted my thoughts again. Your sister just found the prototype's control unit. I watched as Sarah held up what looked like an old circuit board. More electronic junk. This whole setup is embarrassing. He always was terrible with technology. I smiled, remembering how she used to mock my cheap equipment. The control unit she was casually waving around contained revolutionary quantum processing algorithms that would transform medical imaging. And she was selling it for pocket change. How many buyers so far? I asked Daniel. 17. All documented, all recorded. Most of them graduate students or small labs. He paused, checking his notes. And all of them already contacted by our legal team about purchasing the equipment back at a significant profit once the patents are public. I nodded approvingly. Not only would we recover every component, but we'd also have a network of witnesses who could testify about how they acquired the equipment. The fact that they'd make a hefty profit for their cooperation was just good business. What's the status on Barrett Pharmaceuticals' new cancer drug application? Daniel's smile was grim. FDA Review Board meets tomorrow afternoon. Their entire application is based on research that your patents will prove they appropriated from your early work. That had been Father's biggest mistake. When I had first started my research, I had shared some preliminary findings with the company's research division, hoping to collaborate. They had dismissed the results as inconclusive, only to later incorporate the core concepts into their own drug development program. They never suspected that I had documented everything, building an airtight case for patent infringement while letting them dig themselves deeper. The live stream continued as Sarah and her helpers cleared out my lab. Each piece of junk they sold was another nail in Barrett Pharmaceuticals' coffin. Every mocking comment about my failed research was more evidence for tomorrow's revelations. My phone buzzed. Message from Dr. Matthews. Blood work came back perfect. You're officially in complete remission. Of course I was. My treatment had worked exactly as designed. But that news wouldn't become public until after tomorrow's patent announcements and the inevitable stock market chaos that would follow. Daniel, I called softly. How much longer on the chemo bag? He checked the drip. 10 minutes, sir. Your sister is just starting on the storage room. Ah. I smiled. The heart of the operation. The storage room contained what looked like old filing cabinets and boxes of papers. What it actually held was the most comprehensive documentation of medical research fraud ever compiled. 15 years of evidence showing how Barrett Pharmaceuticals had systematically stolen and suppressed innovative research to protect their profit margins. She's calling it a paper purge, Daniel reported, offering to sell lab notes and research documents by the box. Is the SEC's number still on speed dial? He nodded. Their fraud division is standing by. The moment your sister sells those documents, it becomes criminal evidence. I watched as Sarah cheerfully sold box after box of incriminating documents, her live stream providing irrefutable proof of the transaction. The viewers were mainly graduate students and small labs, eager for any glimpse of research notes. They had no idea they were becoming key witnesses in what would soon be the biggest pharmaceutical fraud case in history. Sir, Daniel said quietly. Your father is calling. I glanced at my phone as it buzzed. No doubt he had finally heard rumors about some mysterious patent filings. Too late. Let it go to voicemail, I said. Tomorrow's soon enough for that conversation. The chemotherapy drip beeped its completion. A nurse entered to disconnect me from the machine, marking the end of my treatment. Tomorrow everything would change. Barrett Pharmaceuticals would face its reckoning. My technology would transform cancer treatment, and the family that had dismissed me for 15 years would finally understand what I had built. But for now, I simply watched as my sister finished selling off the evidence of her own family's downfall, one bargain-priced piece at a time. The morning sun crept through my hospital window as I watched the digital clock tick toward 9 a.m. My tablet displayed multiple live streams. The patent office's public filing system, Barrett Pharmaceuticals' stock ticker, and most entertainingly, the company's emergency board meeting. This has to be a mistake, my father was saying, his face flushed with anger. Check the patent applications again. Sarah sat beside him, frantically scrolling through her phone. The equipment we sold. Michael, what did you do? I activated my connection to the boardroom. Good morning, everyone. I trust you've had a chance to review the patent filings. The boardroom erupted in chaos. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on the screen where I appeared, still in my hospital bed, but looking remarkably healthy for someone supposedly at death's door. Impossible, father sputtered. You're supposed to be in critical condition. About that, I smiled, holding up my latest blood work results. It seems my treatment was remarkably successful. My treatment, father, not Barrett Pharmaceuticals' stolen version. Sarah stood up, her perfectly composed facade cracking. What do you mean stolen? Perhaps we should discuss the contents of those research documents you so helpfully sold yesterday. The ones detailing how Barrett Pharmaceuticals systematically appropriated my early research. I nodded to someone off-screen, and Daniel entered the boardroom carrying a stack of papers. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Daniel announced, I'm here representing Dr. Michael Barrett's legal team. You'll find in front of you comprehensive documentation of patent infringement, research theft, and corporate fraud spanning the last 15 years. The board members began flipping through the documents, their faces growing increasingly pale. This is absurd, father declared, but his voice lacked conviction. These patents can't be valid. The technology described here is years ahead of current capabilities. Is it? I pressed a button, and the boardroom screens filled with technical specifications. Everything in those patents has been independently verified and demonstrated. The equipment Sarah sold yesterday, working prototypes, all documented and tracked. The buyers have already agreed to testify about their purchases. Sarah collapsed back into her chair. The live stream, you planned this. Of course I did. Just like I planned the timing of these patents to coincide with Barrett Pharmaceuticals' FDA review of their new cancer drug. A drug based on technology you stole from my early research. The boardroom doors burst open as a group of FDA officials entered, led by Dr. Matthews. William Barrett. One of them stepped forward. We're suspending the review of application BD 247 pending an investigation into patent infringement and research fraud. Father's face went from red to white. You can't, this will destroy the company. No, I corrected him. It will transform it. Check your tablets. You'll find a detailed proposal for restructuring Barrett Pharmaceuticals under new leadership, incorporating my patented technologies legally and ethically. The stock ticker on my screen began to move as the market absorbed the news. Barrett Pharmaceuticals' share price was plummeting, while the small research company I had quietly established years ago was seeing its value soar. Mr. Barrett, one of the board members spoke up, your son's proposals actually appear quite reasonable. The technology he's developed could revolutionize cancer treatment. The same technology you dismissed as a pipe dream 15 years ago, I reminded them. The research you called worthless, while you secretly copied its foundations for your own products. Sarah was still scrolling through her phone, her eyes widening. The equipment we sold, the buyers are all reporting to your lawyers. They're reporting to the SEC, actually. Documenting how Barrett Pharmaceuticals' chief marketing officer personally sold proprietary technology and confidential documents in violation of multiple federal regulations. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Years of corporate malfeasance, documented and packaged for federal prosecutors, all neatly gift-wrapped by their own actions. What do you want? Father finally asked, his voice hollow. What I've always wanted, to help people, to develop treatments that actually cure instead of just managing symptoms. I held up my latest medical scan. This technology works, father. I'm living proof. Dr. Matthews stepped forward. I can confirm that Dr. Barrett's cancer has been completely eradicated using his treatment protocol. The results are unprecedented. The board members began whispering among themselves. I could see the momentum shifting as they calculated the potential profits of legitimate breakthrough treatment versus the cost of fighting federal investigation. There will be a board vote in 1 hour, I announced. You can choose to accept my proposal for restructuring, or you can face the consequences of your actions in court. Either way, these treatments will reach the people who need them. Father stood up slowly, looking every bit his 65 years. You orchestrated all of this. The cancer diagnosis, the lab clearance, everything. I learned from the best, Father. You taught me that business is about seizing opportunities. I just chose to seize them for the right reasons. The next hour passed in a blur of legal discussions and hurried consultation. Sarah sat silent, probably calculating her legal exposure. Father alternated between rage and grudging admiration as he reviewed my complete strategy. When the board reconvened for the vote, the outcome was unanimous. Barrett Pharmaceuticals would be restructured, my technologies would be properly licensed, and most importantly, the treatments would be made available at reasonable costs. One more thing, I added as the meeting concluded. About those graduate students who bought my equipment. More witnesses? Sarah asked bitterly. No, future researchers. Part of the restructuring includes a grant program for young scientists developing innovative treatments. Because unlike some people, I believe in supporting new ideas. As the boardroom emptied, Father approached the screen. You could have destroyed us completely. Why offer a chance to restructure? Because grandfather built this company to help people, before you turned it into a profit machine. I'm just restoring it to its original purpose. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across my hospital room. Tomorrow I would walk out of here, officially cancer-free. Barrett Pharmaceuticals would begin its transformation, and the treatments I'd developed would start helping others. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's reconstruction. 1 month after the board meeting, I stood in my newly reconstructed research lab, watching teams of scientists work with equipment that no longer needed to be disguised as outdated junk. The Barrett Research Institute, as it was now known, had become exactly what I'd envisioned 15 years ago. Dr. Barrett? A young researcher approached, clutching a tablet. The first patient group's results just came in. I took the tablet, scanning the data with practiced ease. Perfect response rates across the board is exactly as my own case had predicted. 30 cancer patients, all showing complete remission within weeks of starting the treatment. Send this to Dr. Matthews for independent verification, I instructed. And make sure the FDA oversight team gets their copy. The transformation of Barrett Pharmaceuticals had been swift and comprehensive. The old board was mostly gone, replaced by a mix of medical researchers and ethical business leaders. Father had retired to avoid federal prosecution, though he still called daily, oscillating between attempts to regain control and reluctant admiration for my methods. Sarah's situation had been more complicated. Looking good, little brother, her voice came from the lab entrance. Almost makes me forget how you trapped me. I turned to face my sister, noting her new business casual attire, quite different from her former executive suits. You trapped yourself, Sarah. I just provided the stage. After the SEC investigation, she'd been given a choice: face federal charges for her role in the company's fraud, or accept a position in the new organization's community outreach program. To everyone's surprise, including her own, she'd chosen the latter. Today's outreach event was interesting, she said, walking into the lab. Try explaining revolutionary quantum-based cancer treatment to a room full of skeptical community leaders. Really makes you appreciate the science. Harder than selling overpriced pharmaceuticals. Different. She picked up a prototype, handling it with newfound respect. You know, I actually read your original research proposals from 15 years ago. The ones Dad rejected. Better late than never. You predicted all of this. She gestured around the lab. The treatment protocols, the community integration, even the pricing structure. We could have done this years ago. The company wasn't ready then. Too focused on quarterly profits. And now? She set down the prototype carefully. Now we're focusing on what matters. I pulled up another screen, showing patient recovery statistics. Every person on this list was given a death sentence by conventional treatments. Now they're cancer-free. The door opened again, admitting Daniel and a group of the graduate students who'd bought my junk equipment during Sarah's live stream. They were now part of our research fellowship program, their fresh perspectives helping to push the technology even further. Dr. Barrett, one of them called out, "We've made a breakthrough with the imaging resolution. Want to see?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed a message from Father. FDA approved fast-track status for the treatment. Stocks up 300%. Maybe you knew what you were doing after all. I showed the message to Sarah, who laughed. He still thinks in stock prices. Some things never change. Some things do, I countered, watching the young researchers excitedly discuss their findings. Look at you. When's the last time you checked the company's stock price? She paused, realizing she hadn't thought about it in weeks. Touché. Hard to care about share value when you're watching actual lives being saved. The afternoon passed in a blur of research reviews and treatment protocol discussions. The institute was running at full capacity, with 3 shifts of scientists working around the clock. Every day brought new discoveries, new applications of the technology. As evening approached, I found myself in my office, formerly Father's, looking at old family photos. There was one from 20 years ago. Father, Sarah, and me at a company charity gala. All smiles for the camera, all playing our assigned roles. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Feeling nostalgic, reflective, I corrected. Did you see the latest numbers from the community clinics? 8 new treatment centers opening next month. Operating costs 70% lower than traditional facilities. She sat down across from me. The board's actually excited about losing money on charitable care. Never thought I'd see the day. We're not losing money. We're investing in people. Now you sound like grandfather. She picked up an old photo of him from my desk. He would have loved this, you know. The research, the community focus, all of it. He knew. I pulled out an old letter from my desk drawer. Found this in those documents you so helpfully sold. He wrote it just before he died, when I was still in college. Sarah read it aloud. Michael understands what this company should be. When the time comes, he'll know what to do. Trust him. Dad never saw this letter. It was in grandfather's personal files. The ones Father never bothered to read because they weren't about profits. A notification popped up on my computer, another successful treatment, another life saved. Sarah watched the data scroll across the screen, shaking her head in wonder. All those years we thought you were failing, she mused. You were actually building something incredible. Sometimes the best work happens in the shadows. I stood up, walking to the window. The sun was setting behind the institute's new research wing, where lights burned bright as teams worked through the night. Want to see something amazing? I led her to the quantum imaging lab, where the graduate students were perfecting their breakthrough. The new resolution could track individual cancer cells in real time, allowing for precisely targeted treatment with zero damage to healthy tissue. This is impossible, Sarah whispered, watching the display. The technology to do this shouldn't exist for decades. According to whom? The same experts who said my research was worthless. She touched the screen gently. How many other breakthroughs are we missing because we're too focused on quarterly reports? That's why we changed everything. I pulled up the Institute's mission statement on a nearby monitor. Innovation without barriers. Research without profit pressure. Treatment without bankruptcy. Father still doesn't understand, Sarah said. He keeps talking about privatizing the patents, raising prices once the publicity dies down. He never will understand. That's why he's not in charge anymore. The night shift was arriving, fresh teams of researchers ready to push the boundaries further. Among them were doctors from community clinics, learning to use the technology they'd soon be taking back to their patients. Tomorrow's board meeting should be interesting, Sarah remarked. The old guards pushing back on the Global Access Initiative. Let them push. The patents are ironclad, and they're licensed for humanitarian use. They can either help us change the world, or they can step aside. As we walked back to our offices, Sarah stopped suddenly. Why did you give me a second chance? After everything I did. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something new in her eyes, understanding. Maybe even purpose. Because everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were. Isn't that what all this is about? The Institute hummed with activity around us. A symphony of innovation and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new breakthroughs, new lives to save. But for now, watching my sister finally understand what I'd been building all these years, I knew the price of deception had been worth it. 6 months after the Institute's transformation, I sat in the auditorium watching Sarah deliver a presentation to the World Health Organization. My sister, once focused solely on marketing overpriced drugs, was now passionately explaining our global accessibility program to an international audience. The Barrett Protocol isn't just a treatment, she was saying, it's a revolution in medical care delivery. Every clinic, every hospital, regardless of location or resources, can implement this technology. I smiled, remembering how she used to mock my ideas about universal access to treatment. Now she was its strongest advocate. The data behind her told the story. 10,000 patients treated, 97% success rate, 0 bankruptcies. The quantum imaging technology had been successfully deployed in 200 clinics worldwide, with another 500 scheduled for implementation by year's end. My phone buzzed. A message from Father watching the WHO live stream. Sarah's presentation reminds me of your grandfather. Maybe you both knew something I didn't. Progress comes in many forms. After the presentation, I found Sarah in the green room, surrounded by doctors from developing nations eager to bring the technology to their communities. Dr. Barrett, one of them approached me. Your sister was explaining the rural clinic program. Is it true there's no licensing fee? The only cost is training your staff. I confirmed. The patents are held in a humanitarian trust. No one owns this technology. It belongs to everyone. Sarah joined me after the crowd dispersed. Remember when I used to think profit margins were the only measure of success? You've come a long way from selling my junk equipment online. She laughed, but her eyes were serious. Those graduate students who bought the equipment, they're doing amazing work in their home countries now. Sometimes I think that live stream was the best mistake I ever made. We walked to the Institute's new Global Command Center, where screens tracked treatment centers worldwide. Every glowing dot represented lives being saved, hope being restored. Father was waiting for us there. He looked older now, more subdued, but there was something different in his eyes when he watched the tracking screens. I spoke to the board this morning, he said quietly. They've unanimously approved the expansion of the rural clinic program, even offered to fund it personally. The same board members who thought my research was worthless. I couldn't resist asking. We were wrong, he admitted, perhaps for the first time in his life. Your grandfather, he used to talk about building something meaningful. I never understood what he meant until now. Sarah touched one of the screens, tracing the pattern of clinics spreading across continents. Each dot is a life saved, a family kept whole. That's grandfather's legacy. No, father corrected her. It's Michael's legacy. He built this while we were too blind to see it. I joined them at the screen, watching another dot illuminate as a new clinic came online. It's everyone's legacy now. The researchers, the doctors, the patients brave enough to try something new. The Institute had become more than I'd ever dreamed. Not just a research facility, but a beacon of hope. The quantum imaging technology was already being adapted for other diseases. The treatment protocols were being taught in medical schools worldwide. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Daniel. Sir, the last of the old Barrett Pharmaceuticals patents has been converted to humanitarian trust. It's really over. I showed the message to Father and Sarah. A moment of silence passed between us, marking the end of one era and the triumph of another. So what's next? Sarah asked, her eyes bright with possibility. I pulled up the latest research data on my tablet. There's a team in Bangkok making fascinating progress with the quantum imaging. They think they can adapt it for early detection, prevention instead of just treatment. Father mused. Your grandfather would have loved that. Outside the command center windows, the sun was setting on another day of breakthrough discoveries and lives saved. In hospitals and clinics around the world, patients were receiving treatment that would have seemed like science fiction just months ago. The deception, the long game, the careful planning. It had all led to this moment. Not revenge, but revolution. Not destruction, but transformation. Next, I said, watching another dot light up on the screen. We change everything else. Sarah smiled. Father nodded. And somewhere I knew, grandfather was watching with pride. The end.